Who is the most dangerous person you've ever met? I know a person who I call one phone call guy. Meaning whatever I need or want I can call him and he will make it so. How did I meet this person? Why was this offer extended to me? Long ago I took care of a dying woman, his wife. He appreciated my care and said that I had gone above and beyond what any other nurse or family member had done for her in her last days on earth. He felt indebted to me for this. I felt I was just doing what any compassionate caregiver would do. This was some 30 years ago and I, at the time, had no idea who this man was, other than a grieving husband whose wife was under my care. I learned of his nefarious activities about 3 years ago. I had long forgotten about the generous offer he made me, or really who he was, until waiting in line at the bank one day. I remember standing in a long line waiting for my turn to make a deposit. While waiting I noticed the cutest little girl behind me who seemed bored. She began tugging on the brightly colored lanyard with my truck keys on it that stuck out of the back pocket of my shorts. My keys eventually fell out onto the tiled floor and made quite the noise. The little girl was startled by the clatter and began crying. The man who was looking after her picked her up and gently chastised her for tugging on my keys. This did not calm her down. I turned around, looked the man in his eyes and asked if it would be okay if I could hold her while we waited. I also said her playing with the lanyard didn't bother me, that I have children and long lines at the bank are indeed difficult for adults too. The man quietly mumbled something as he passed the toddler into my outstretched arms. She began quieting down while I asked questions for her to answer without speaking, but by pointing. Such as, can you point to a light, or a door or a pen? Simple questions to distract her. Again I was facing front with the man behind me. I then felt a tap on my shoulder and heard him say something to the effect of why had I not called him all these years. I twirled around hugging the toddler and asked him to repeat his question. He did, however I was still at a loss. I did not recognize him or his voice and thought he mistook me for someone else. He then said, Mindy, don't you remember who I am? You must be doing good or you would have called and taken me up on my offer. At this point I was even more confused. He obviously knew me as he called me by my nickname that not many know. I often run into former patients that I assisted in their labor and delivery and I figured he was a husband of one of them. However, I would only give out my nickname to very few of my patients. The ones that I had in my care for longer periods of time and usually in health crises. His face suddenly softened and I could see sadness creeping in his eyes, yet I could not place him. He then proceeded to say how we had met and how much he was still grateful to me. It was then I remembered who he was. I gave him a big hug and explained that I did not know what he meant by telling me to call him should I need anything. I further explained I was capable of doing whatever by myself and did not want to bother him or anyone to get things done lol. At that point it was my turn to go up to the teller's window and I handed him back his little girl. He handed me a fancy looking business card, again repeated his offer of help, hugged me quite tightly then made his way to another teller. His transaction was faster than mine as he was headed to the exit before me. As he was pushing the door open, he looked back to me and said not to forget his offer. Once the door closed I shrugged my shoulders and smiled at the teller before me. It was then I noticed her mouth was wide open and she could have used my help to pick her jaw up off the counter. When the teller composed herself, she quietly spoke under her breath asking me how I knew this man. I said, oh, I took care of his wife many years ago. She then asked if I knew who he really was. To which I replied, yes, he is the husband of one of my patients that I took care of many years ago. By this time the bank manager made her way over to us and quietly informed me that he may have been my patient's husband, but he also was known to be the leader of the local mafia and not a man to fool with. I still have not made that one phone call. However, I did run into the man who is the husband of one of my patients many years ago and we have nice conversations. The offer of help is always extended.